Welcome back to the book of Romans. Again, I'm your teacher, Dr. Benjamin Olson. We're going to get into this major passage, Romans chapter 8, verses 28 to 30. There's some really misunderstood words and phrases in this passage that we need to understand in the context of what Paul is talking about. Understand, Paul is referring to, in this passage, starting in verse 18, going all the way through the end of chapter 8, our glorification, the future tense salvation or deliverance from the presence of sin. In fact, not just for ourselves and the the believers, but for the whole of creation, bringing about what the way things ought to be, right? And relating it back to today in our present state that we are in the Spirit, anticipating, because the Spirit knows the future, the Spirit knows the will of God, the Spirit knows what ought to be, and so allowing the Spirit to pray on our behalf. So again, speaking to believers, speaking to those who are already justified, who are being sanctified, and now looking forward to our eventual glorification. Verse 28, and we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. First of all, Paul is talking about the mechanism that God is using through the Spirit. The Spirit knows the will of God. The Spirit knows what God wants, what God is desiring, right? And so this is how God is doing that. And it's actually a really fascinating look into the very sovereignty of God. That God is not orchestrating as in doing things to cause things. In other words, there's no direct agency of God in the world. Notice God is the primary cause, bringing about secondary causes. You see this in verse 28 perfectly. And we know that all things work together for good. God is indirectly ordering reality. God is not directly ordering reality. God is the primary cause, but allowing secondary causes to operate. God is, notice it does not say God works all things together for good. It says we know that all things work together for good. Notice God is the primary cause. God is providentially in charge, but He is not, in His sovereignty, is not causing things directly to happen. That's so fascinating in this verse, and it's something that people get so wrong all the time, because they replace the subject of the sentence, which is all things work together for good, with God works all things together for good. That's not what the verse says. That's not what the verse means. God is the primary cause. God is the one who is enacting the overall plan, but it is the creation itself groaning because of sin. God is allowing these secondary causes, which means sin, which means things that God is not the direct cause of. God is not the direct cause of sin. God is not the direct cause of evil. We are the cause of evil. We human beings. And go back to the original or the beginning of the passage, right? It's that the earth is waiting for the sons of God to appear, the revealing of the sons of God, the resurrected Christians, to bring about an earth that is renewed. It's only in the resurrection that can happen. So what is the good for those who love God? It's our glorification. It's the fact that we are waiting for this good thing to happen, again, in context of the rest of chapter 8. Don't miss this. This is not something that we take lightly. Don't take this verse out of its context of chapter 8. All right? It's the glorification of the believers for the renewal of the earth. That the earth itself will be renewed at the resurrection of the saints, at the second coming of Jesus Christ, when believers who are joint heirs with Christ are ruling over this earth for the millennial kingdom. That's what we're looking for. That's the good that God is bringing about to those who love God, who are called according to His purpose. That's you and me. Then Paul continues on in this, okay, so who are those who love God? Right? Who are the ones who love God? Is it anybody who just says they love God? No, he clarifies those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. And then for the next two verses, has to clarify who the called of God are. So verse 29, again, we're looking at the world now from God's perspective. For whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son. So notice he starts out with this, for whom he foreknew. God knows the future. God knows exactly what will happen. Now, I'm going to leave this to you because you're actually going to be writing a paper on this in this class. So I'm not going to get into in the lecture here about prescience versus relational foreknowledge, the Calvinist view versus the Arminian view. You're going to make those decisions on your own in your position papers as you read the different commentaries that are available there. But those are the two particular options there. But in whatever way in which God foreknew, he did predestine. So we can't get away from that. We can't get away from the fact that God did predestinate to those to be conformed to the image of his Son. The question really on this is how did God foreknow? Did he look through the annals of time to see who would believe, or did he choose sovereignly those whom he would believe, and he foreknew them in a relational sense, and then chose them or elected them based on that? Notice the term election is not used here at all. The word chose is not used here at all. Instead, it's those whom he foreknew, those he predestined to become so predestination is at hand here, not election. Again, it's a very subtle difference. Election or predestination is based on election, but here it's instead foreknow and then predestined. But notice the predestination is not to justification. The predestination is to the ultimate end of salvation, which is to be fully conformed to the image of his Son. This is not even sanctification we're talking about here. This is future tense glorification. That ultimately what God is working together for good is not sanctification even, which I've taught before in the past, like, oh yeah, conforming to the image of his Son, that's what we're to be doing right now, is being conformed to the image of his Son. That is a present tense, yes, but that's not the ultimate good. The ultimate good is when all are resurrected, or when all believers are resurrected in the glorification, in the renewal of the earth, ultimately when all things are made right. That's the good that God is working together, or that God is the primary cause of, as the secondary causes. All things are working together for that good. The good is to be conformed to the image of his Son. Notice it's very personal. I need to be conformed to the image of his Son. Notice that he might be firstborn among many brethren. What does that mean? Resurrection. Jesus Christ is the firstborn of the resurrection. The term firstborn here is not that he is born first. We see that this is not a chronological that he was born first, but rather the term firstborn is referring to primogeniture, i.e. he's the heir of salvation, or the heir of the apparent, the crown prince of. It's a position, as in he has the position of the firstborn of the family. This is not that he might be firstborn among many brethren, but rather the firstborn is the word to refer to those who are in charge. That he might be firstborn among many brethren. That we are joint, again, go back to the earlier passage, earlier parts of the passage, that we are awaiting the adoption. We are children of God. We have this, that we are joint fellow heirs of salvation, back in verse 17. That we are the brethren of Jesus Christ, in that we have, we're joint heirs of this future tense salvation, this glorification. Verse 30, moreover, whom he predestined, those he also called, those he called, he also justified. Notice again here the verse 30 here, this golden chain of salvation, referring to the past, present, and future tense. The past tense here goes all the way back to creation, all the way back to before creation. Whom he predestined, these he also called. That called is the gospel call. That he brought the gospel call to those who would be justified. Those whom he predestined, these he also called. This is what Calvinists would call the effective call. It works through the gospel call, but it's those who would answer that call, those whom he called, these he also justified. Notice no drop off between those. He called those whom he called, he also justified. Past tense salvation, or past tense justification, Romans chapter 3, verse 21 through chapter 5. And those whom he justified, these he also, and notice this, past tense, glorified. Even though that's future tense to us, notice all of this in verse 30, this golden chain to God is all one past tense. And notice it's actually, I say past tense in Greek, it's actually what's called the aorist tense, which is that it is just simply something that happened, as in it's just a point in time something happened. It's not necessarily emphasizing the past tense nature of it, but what I do see here is that for God it is one eternal present tense, i.e. it did happen to God in God's mind. Notice glorification here, future tense to us, past tense as it were to God, or eternal present tense if you want to call it that. It just simply happened, / happens, / is happening, / will happen. For God, that's all one tense. I am that I am. He's one single tense. That's not there's no past, present, or future with God. So notice here again, this golden chain, no drop off between them. For whom he predestined, them he also called. Notice he does not, by the way, repeat those whom he foreknew. Okay, instead he starts with the predestination. And again, you can talk about that in your paper if you want. Moreover, whom he predestined, these he also called. Those whom he called in the gospel call, these he also justified. That gospel call being the impetus for the justification as we respond in faith. Those whom he justified, these he also glorified. Again, past tense.